Erika Kirk has become the center of a storm she never asked for. Supporters see strength, critics see mystery, and every post she shares sparks new debate. In a world where silence becomes evidence and grief is dissected in real time, rumors and speculation swirl faster than facts. Tonight, we break down how Erika's story became a battleground and why the truth keeps slipping through the cracks. When the tragedy struck, the reaction was immediate, emotional, and overwhelming. The news didn't simply trend, it dominated every corner of social media, turning timelines into a chaotic mixture of shock, heartbreak, and confusion. Erika Kirk, once known primarily as a supportive partner in her husband's public journey, suddenly found herself thrust into a role she never anticipated, the face of a story unfolding in real time before an audience of millions. Overnight, the weight of grief collided with the demands of public attention, and people who had never met her or even followed her life began dissecting every detail surrounding her response. At first, the outpouring of support was immense. Messages of sympathy, prayers, and tributes poured in from all directions. But as the initial wave of emotion settled, the internet did what it so often does. It shifted from compassion to curiosity. Old interviews were resurfaced, pictures were clipped, and moments that once held no deeper meaning were cast under a magnifying glass. Supporters saw pain in her eyes, strength in her posture, and dignity in her silence. Critics saw questions, gaps, and ambiguity. They scrutinized when she spoke, when she didn't, what she wore, and even her tone. This wasn't based on verified information, just emotional interpretation amplified by the sheer velocity of online attention. In the middle of personal devastation, Erika became a symbol, a focal point for a narrative too large for any one person to control. Her every appearance was replayed endlessly, her words picked apart, her silence treated as a statement in itself. The tragedy didn't just change Erika's life, it changed the way millions viewed her, projecting their own expectations, fears, and assumptions onto someone still processing loss. And as the world watched, the story began to twist into something far more complicated than anyone expected. In the weeks that followed, Erika's presence online and in public remained sparse. To many, this was entirely understandable. Grief rarely follows a predictable schedule, and the emotional toll of sudden loss can make even the simplest communication overwhelming. But on social media, silence isn't always interpreted as healing. Instead, it becomes an empty space waiting to be filled, and the internet filled it with speculation, theories, and assumptions, none of which were backed by confirmed details. Supporters interpreted her quiet stance as grace, choosing privacy over public spectacle. They admired her courage to step away, arguing that no one owed the world a steady stream of explanations during a time of heartbreak. To them, Erika's restraint was a sign of strength and integrity, a refusal to perform grief for an audience that often demands emotional transparency. But critics viewed the same silence through an entirely different lens. They saw unanswered questions, confusing timelines, and a lack of clarity as reasons to push narratives forward. Even without evidence, some began piecing together theories based solely on what wasn't said, rather than what was. As Erika continued to step back from the spotlight, speculation intensified. A Bible verse posted without context turned into a conversation point. A missed public appearance became fodder for threads analyzing her motive. The truth remained simple. Erika had not addressed most of these circulating narratives. Yet online, silence took on a meaning of its own. Debates grew louder, arguments grew harsher, and people chose sides based on interpretation rather than verified information. In that vacuum, the story shifted away from reality and toward perception. Silence, intended or not, became a blank canvas, and the internet painted whatever story it wanted. As Erika remained selective about her public engagement, the online world filled the gaps with its own versions of the truth. Forums, social feeds, and discussion channels began overflowing with theories, some mild, others wildly ungrounded. What all these theories had in common was one thing: they were built on speculation, not verified fact. Yet the emotional charge behind them made them spread rapidly, fueled by the collective desire to understand a situation that remained deeply private. Users dug through old footage, dissected every word, and compared timelines with almost forensic intensity. Commentary channels produced breakdown videos, reaction streams, and lengthy explainers that claimed to connect invisible dots. A single ambiguous screenshot could spark 1,000 comments. A small detail, like Erika's choice of words or expressions, would be treated as evidence, despite no substantiation. None of these theories came from official sources or reliable documentation. They came from ordinary viewers interpreting fragments through the lens of grief, curiosity, or bias. The rise of these theories revealed a deeper truth about the online world. People crave certainty even in uncertainty, and when certainty isn't available, they create stories that feel emotionally satisfying. Some framed Erika as a misunderstood figure navigating loss and responsibility. Others painted her as distant or guarded, but both sides were constructing narratives based on partial information. Content creators fed the cycle, sometimes unintentionally, sometimes deliberately, because controversy drives attention, and attention drives numbers. Meanwhile, Erika herself remained silent on these theories. She never confirmed them, never commented on them, never validated their claims. The lack of response didn't mean they were true. It simply created more room for imagination. And as theories multiplied, the divide between perception and reality widened, setting the stage for the intense polarization that defined the next phase of the public conversation. As the online noise escalated, something predictable yet explosive happened. Prominent personalities started weighing in, not because they had new information, most didn't, but because the topic had become too big to ignore. And when influential voices step into a narrative already tangled with speculation, the effect isn't calming, it's catalytic. Commentators across the political and cultural spectrum began discussing Erika's situation, each with their own angle. Some approached it with empathy, acknowledging the complexity of grief and the pressure of public scrutiny. Others took a more provocative tone, purposefully highlighting the inconsistencies and unanswered questions circulating online. Their videos, live streams, and podcast segments gained traction instantly. But the problem with influence is that even mild opinions carry weight far beyond their intent. A single phrase, a hint of doubt, or even a raised eyebrow in a clip can spark thousands of interpretations. One creator, offering what they framed as cautious commentary, noted the curious timing of certain events. They didn't present evidence or claim certainty, but that one observation was enough to ignite new waves of debate. Another commentator suggested caution against jumping to conclusions, urging viewers not to mistake speculation for fact. Yet even this neutral reminder became fuel, because some interpreted it as coded criticism, while others seized it as validation. This is how narratives shift online, not through facts, but through tone, timing, and the assumptions audiences bring with them. As conversations spread, larger platforms joined the discourse. Talk shows, podcasts, and even news segments referenced the online frenzy, framing it as a cultural moment. They mentioned the divide, the speculation, and the emotional intensity, but rarely addressed the lack of verifiable evidence behind most of it. Viewers took these mentions as confirmation that there was something there, even when hosts explicitly acknowledged that much of what was circulating was unproven. Meanwhile, smaller creators capitalized on the momentum. Their breakdown videos, reaction clips, and explainers skyrocketed in popularity. Some offered measured takes, others leaned into sensationalism. And because the internet rewards engagement more than accuracy, the most dramatic interpretations often spread the fastest. None of this was grounded in verified fact, but the attention it generated made it feel bigger, more urgent, more real. For Erika, this meant her story was no longer hers to shape. It belonged to the audience, the influencers, the algorithms, each pulling the narrative in different directions. What started as a tragedy had become a topic, then a debate, and now a culture-wide spectacle fueled by voices far removed from the actual situation. And with each new opinion, the divide grew wider, setting the stage for something even more polarizing, a full-on split in public perception. As the commentary intensified, the online world fractured into two distinct camps, each convinced they understood the truth, and each unwilling to acknowledge the possibility that they could be wrong. That's the paradox of digital discourse. People crave certainty, even when the situation is murky, emotional, and fundamentally unknowable from the outside. Erika didn't just become a public figure at the center of discussion. She became a canvas onto which millions projected their own fears, values, and unresolved tensions. The first group saw Erika as a symbol of resilience. They defended her choices, her tone, her silence, and her faith-centered messaging. They argued that she was navigating impossible circumstances with admirable grace and dignity. To them, every criticism felt like an attack on a grieving woman, and every piece of speculation felt cruel and unfair. They pointed out how public grief often gets twisted and how easy it is for outsiders to misinterpret behavior through the lens of their own biases. The second group interpreted nearly everything through suspicion. To them, gaps in communication were red flags. Emotional moments were examined like evidence. Posts were taken out of context and reframed with the most dramatic possible interpretation. Even neutral actions, attending events, avoiding interviews, posting a quote, were spun into narratives that implied hidden motives. But it's crucial to note, these interpretations remained speculation, not proven fact. They were opinions, amplified through repetition, not conclusions supported by verifiable information. As these two perspectives clashed, the tone of the discourse shifted from analysis to outright conflict. Supporters and critics debated fiercely, each citing their own interpretations as truth. Threads became battlegrounds. Comment sections turned into arenas of emotional performance. People unfollowed friends, argued with strangers, and created entire communities centered around their chosen narrative. Algorithms designed to amplify engagement pushed the most polarizing content to the forefront. Clips that portrayed Erika sympathetically and clips that cast doubt both surged because outrage and affirmation drive clicks. The more divided the audience became, the more attention the story generated. It was a feedback loop. Controversy created engagement, engagement created visibility, and visibility fed the controversy. Some viewers tried to remain neutral, acknowledging the complexity without taking a side. But in an environment where subtlety dies quickly, neutrality became almost invisible. The loudest voices dominated the conversation, drowning out nuance with certainty and speculation. And Erika, whose actions had not fundamentally changed, found herself framed as either an icon or an enigma, depending entirely on who you asked. The result? Two completely different digital realities, each convincing, each emotionally compelling, and neither fully grounded in confirmed truth. It was less about Erika herself and more about what people needed her story to represent. And that polarization set the stage for her to reclaim her platform, or for the internet to reshape it for her. In the midst of escalating speculation and social media chaos, Erika began to reclaim her voice. But she did it in a way that caught many by surprise. Instead of engaging directly with the controversy, refuting theories, or responding to critics, she leaned into the core pillars that had always defined her: faith, community, and purpose-driven initiatives. Some viewers saw this as a strategic pivot. Others interpreted it as genuine conviction. But the outcome was undeniable. Her platform transformed. Erika's public appearances became carefully considered, focused less on the swirling narratives around her and more on causes she cared about. She spoke about healing, unity, forgiveness, and resilience. She highlighted charitable work, educational programs, and community outreach, and she consistently framed her message around moving forward rather than dwelling on the speculation surrounding her name. To supporters, this was proof of her character. It showed strength, clarity, and an unwavering commitment to something bigger than the chaos. Critics, however, saw her approach through a different lens. They interpreted her positivity as avoidance, her faith-centered messaging as calculated, and her selective engagements as evidence of careful image management. But again, it is important to emphasize, these interpretations were speculative, not based on verified information. They reflected the viewer's assumptions more than Erika's stated intent. Her actual words remained grounded in themes of healing and unity, not confrontation or denial. As Erika expanded her outreach, her platform grew in new ways. She began hosting events, collaborating on projects, and appearing on panels where the focus was less on her personal life and more on community impact. Supporters applauded this shift, arguing that she was turning pain into purpose. Even some critics acknowledged that her message resonated with audiences seeking hope amid turmoil. But her reemergence did not erase the polarized reactions. It amplified them. Every new speech, every appearance, every social post sparked analysis. Supporters cited them as evidence of her integrity. Critics dissected them for subtext. And because Erika remained committed to forward-looking themes, she rarely addressed the specifics of the controversy directly, creating a dynamic where the internet filled in the silence with its own interpretations. Yet beneath all the noise, something undeniable emerged. Erika was shaping her platform on her own terms, not by responding to rumors, not by feeding the speculation, but by doubling down on what mattered to her. Whether seen as strategy or sincerity, her consistent messaging began to shift the narrative. It didn't end the debates, but it reframed her role from passive subject to active voice. And that shift, quiet, deliberate, and emotionally grounded, became the catalyst for the next wave of conversation. Because when a narrative is built on speculation, nothing is more disruptive than a person who chooses to define herself instead of letting the internet do it for her. As Erika's message of healing and purpose gained visibility, something unusual happened. Instead of her words calming the discourse, they became fuel for yet another cycle of online misinterpretation. In the modern media landscape, even positivity can be weaponized, and Erika's faith-driven approach was no exception. Every quote she shared, every verse, every image of quiet reflection was dissected with the intensity usually reserved for political scandal. Her supporters were moved, encouraged, strengthened, but in the hands of critics, the same posts became material for hyper-analysis, twisted into narratives that had less to do with Erika and more to do with the assumptions viewers brought to the screen. What made these misinterpretations so potent wasn't Erika's content. It was the ecosystem that surrounded it. News outlets, influencers, and commentary channels began referencing Erika's posts as evidence of ongoing controversy, even though they rarely clarified that much of what circulated online was speculation without verified foundation. Headlines shifted subtly, using ambiguous phrasing, some online claim, or viewers question, statements that skirted around the truth by framing unverified opinions as noteworthy developments. These linguistic tricks blurred the line between fact and rumor, giving speculation a veneer of legitimacy. Echo chambers formed quickly. In one corner, supporters praised Erika's commitment to forgiveness, sharing her posts as examples of strength. In another, critics reinterpreted the same content as coded messages or strategic image management. Reactions within these groups fed back into themselves, amplifying extremes. Someone in a critical subreddit would dissect her body language in a panel appearance, and suddenly, thousands believed their interpretation was indisputable. Someone on a supportive Facebook group would share a heartfelt message about Erika's grace, and those comments would echo for days. Both sides built narratives that reflected their worldview, not Erika's actual statements. The algorithms played a massive role in escalating this behavior. Content tagged with Erika's name, positive or negative, performed well, and platforms rewarded whatever kept viewers engaged the longest. Clips were edited to emphasize tension, tone, or ambiguity. Entire videos were crafted around single screenshot. The complexity of Erika's reality, her grief, her responsibilities, and her personal boundaries became overshadowed by a digital fog made up of half-truths, guesses, and emotionally charged takes. Erika's refusal to address the theories directly, an understandable choice for someone prioritizing healing, was interpreted in contradictory ways. Supporters saw it as maturity, critics saw it as evasion. And because she didn't break her silence in the way certain viewers expected, people filled that space with their own preconceived narratives. It became a cycle: silence, misinterpretation, speculation, amplification, silence again. This echo chamber atmosphere made one thing very clear: the narrative surrounding Erika was no longer about truth. It was about perception, projection, and the collective need to make sense of a reality that wasn't theirs to interpret. And as these distortions grew, the pressure on Erika to respond became impossible to ignore. The turning point arrived unexpectedly. After weeks of increasingly polarized discussion, Erika finally chose to address the situation directly, but not with aggression, confrontation, or defensiveness. Instead, she responded with an understated, emotionally grounded message that felt more like a reflection than a rebuttal. It was a carefully chosen statement about grief, forgiveness, and the importance of compassion in times of chaos. She didn't call anyone out, didn't counter accusations, and didn't validate any of the online theories. She simply offered a reminder: everyone grieves differently. Please speak with empathy. That message landed like a thunderclap. Supporters praised it instantly, calling it powerful, dignified, and exactly what was needed. They shared her words across platforms, turning them into a symbol of grace under pressure. They highlighted the strength it takes to face public speculation without lashing out, the courage needed to rise above noise and remain focused on healing. Her tone wasn't defensive, it was steady. And that steadiness drew empathy, especially from people who had watched the chaos unfold without participating in it. Critics, however, interpreted her statement differently. Some insisted it was vague, lacking specificity, and strategically timed. They questioned whether it was crafted to deflect attention rather than address underlying concerns. But once again, it's important to emphasize, these interpretations came from audiences, not from verified sources. experiences. Erika's message itself remained grounded in compassion, not in discussion of unverified claims or speculation. In reality, she avoided indulging those rumors entirely, likely because doing so would only add fuel to the fire. Her decision to respond in a way that centered empathy introduced a new layer to the narrative. For some, it was a reminder of the human experience behind the headlines, a grieving woman navigating unimaginable loss while the world dissected her every move. For others, it was an unsatisfying answer to a story they had emotionally invested in. They wanted closure, answers, or drama. Instead, Erika offered nuance and restraint, which didn't line up with the storyline some viewers had built for her. Still, the effect of her message couldn't be denied. It shifted the tone, even if temporarily. Many viewers expressed relief at finally hearing from her directly. Others recognized the emotional weight of her words and reconsidered the harshness of their earlier assumptions. Even some critics softened their stance, acknowledging that grief is a deeply personal journey and that the internet's expectations were unfair. But the most striking effect came after the initial waves of reaction died down. For the first time in weeks, the conversation wasn't driven by speculation. It was driven by Erika's own voice. Her response reframed the narrative, placing emphasis not on theories or assumptions, but on humanity and emotional complexity. She didn't resolve every argument or silence every critic, but she created a moment of clarity in a storm of distortion. And as her message reverberated across platforms, it raised a question many viewers had been avoiding. If Erika's own voice can't cut through the noise, what does that say about the environment we've created? As the dust settled, it became clear that Erika's situation had evolved into something far larger than any individual moment, post, or comment. What began as a tragic event transformed into a cultural case study of how modern audiences process grief, power, and public visibility. Erika, whether she wanted to be or not, had become a symbol of the internet's relentless appetite for narrative. But that symbol was distorted through the lens of millions, each viewer interpreting her actions based on their own experiences, values, and fears. Her supporters saw a woman navigating unbearable loss while carrying the weight of a legacy. Her critics saw gaps in communication and interpreted them through suspicion. But the truth lived somewhere beyond both perspectives, obscured by the layers of speculation and emotion that had accumulated over weeks. The online world demanded answers even when no answers were owed, and in that demand, people projected their own stories onto Erika's life. What made this entire saga so revealing wasn't Erika's actions. It was the public's reaction. It highlighted how social media rewards certainty over nuance, outrage over understanding, and sensationalism over empathy. Unverified claims spread faster than measured analysis. Emotional narratives overshadow factual context. And once people chose a side, they tended to filter every new piece of information through the lens of their chosen narrative. Erika's approach, quiet, grounded, faith-focused, stood in direct contrast to the chaotic noise around her. Some admired her restraint, others found it frustrating. But that contrast exposed a deeper truth about digital culture. People often mistake silence for meaning. They assume a lack of response is strategic rather than human. They interpret ambiguity as evidence rather than a normal part of complex emotional experiences. And in this environment, a grieving individual becomes an avatar for the public's unresolved anxieties. Meanwhile, Erika continued to use her platform in ways that reflected her values. She focused on community, faith, and healing. She spoke at events, participated in initiatives, and tried to reclaim her narrative without feeding the speculation that had overshadowed her. Whether one views those actions as authentic or strategic is subjective, but importantly, those interpretations are based on perception, not confirmed information. And that distinction is the key takeaway. Erika's story serves as a mirror for how modern audiences consume public figures. It reveals the dangers of jumping to conclusions, the harm caused by misinformation, and the power of perception to distort truth. It also shows the impossible position people, especially women, are placed in when navigating grief under the spotlight. Every decision becomes a headline. Every silence becomes a statement. Every word becomes a trigger for debate. As the narrative around Erika continues to evolve, one thing remains certain. The truth has been buried beneath layers of speculation, agenda, and emotion. What began as personal tragedy became public theater, not because Erika asked for it, but because the internet demanded it. And now, the real question isn't about her, it's about us. What does it say about our culture that a grieving woman's story became a battleground? And if perception can overshadow truth so easily, how can anyone truly control their own narrative in the age of infinite voices?